Thanks. Welcome, everybody, to the Green Dialogue. This is a fairly informal conversation, and each week we have, um, uh, almost every week, we have a guest speaker. And today we are blessed with Emma Campbell, who's our naturalist at the township, and just going to share a little update on what she's been up to. And if you have any updates that you would like to share later in the conversation, or immediate ones, you're welcome to do that. So without further ado, welcome. And Emma, thank you for joining us today. You are such a wealth of information, and we feel lucky to have you. I feel lucky.
Well, thank you so much for saying that. I feel very lucky to work in the township. I do. And this community has really launched me forward into all this knowledge. So I really thank the community for being so involved and pushing me so much in this field. So yeah, I did. Can I show my presentation? I just threw together some pictures and things.
If that's okay with everyone else, you should be able to share your screen.
Okay. Okay. All right. Can everyone see that?
Yep. Yes.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I'm just here to really share what we are doing. So Leroy and I were just kind of spitballing that it'd be cool quarterly to share what we do for stewardship throughout the season. So it changes so much. Our focus of our plants change. The focus of the stewardship we're doing changes, just like the season. So fall started September 22nd, I think, or 23rd. And it goes to December 21st when winter officially starts. So that's the official fall season. And so just to really quick, I just jumped in here, but I'm the stewardship coordinator for the township. In 2020, I started the Meridian Conservation Corps, which is our community's volunteer group that we go out every week and we do something stewardship oriented in the township. So my role is really to look at the 1,700 acres we have acquired as a township and learn about them, learn what grows there, what's happening there, what invasives are there, and then creating a plan to apply to all these 1,700 acres. So I think it's about like 54, 55 properties total. And so each one is different. So that's the job I have, and it's really fun. I have 3 part-time staff now, which is really helpful. So that's just kind of a preface of what I do before we get into our stewardship. So this is just at a glance what we're working on this time of year. So I'm really excited. We're moving into invasive shrub cutting, which we'll talk about each of these things in a little more detail. But it's my favorite time of the year. I really enjoy this type of work. It gets a lot of stress out if you've ever done it. You can see these volunteers standing by a huge pile of brush. We're also coming down to the end of so we do utilize herbicide. My team is all licensed to apply herbicide in our parks and preserves. Oops, sorry, I got something in my eye. And then, unfortunately, it's one of the trade-offs of the spot we've gotten ourselves into. But, we do have to use herbicide for certain species. It's a tool in our toolbox that we absolutely need. But we use integrative pest management. So we use a lot of other tools as well, such as mechanical, prescribed fire, that sort of thing. But yeah, my team has been working on those chemical treatments. We're trying to get a handle on some really nasty priority species in the township. We're also coming to the end of our vernal pool monitoring. I know that people who attend the Green Dialogue, and I'm sure you've talked about the vernal pool patrol. But yeah, we're looking at our last visits to our vernal pools that we monitor. we're getting into seed collection, which is super fun. It's a very relaxing, mindful activity we get to do. And I will talk more about that. And of course, with seed collection comes seed sorting. So we have a lot of really fun things we get to do this time of year. And we're really starting to fall into this cycle where, you know, this time of year starts coming around, and we've been scouting for possible seed collection sites and where we can do shrub cutting and all this work. And feel free to ask questions throughout, but we will have some time at the end. So yeah, with our fall invasive management, so some of these things, I'm hoping some of these species are familiar to folks. That's my job, is to educate on what these things are. If you want to learn more, the best way to learn, I think, is come out with us, because you learn pretty quick after you remove, you know, 20 to 50 of these things. But like I said, we, my staff, we do chemical treatments. So that can be a variety of things, but a foliar, so that's where you're spraying over the leafy vegetation of the plant. And then we also do like injections, which you literally inject herbicide into the stump of a plant. We use that for Japanese knotweed. And we also have, it's called a hack and squirt, that we use for things like tree of heaven, which we really just started getting into. We haven't really managed any of the tree of heaven. We didn't want to touch it until we knew what to do, because it's a very reactive plant. So that's a lot of what my staff is doing. Right now, we're really coming to the end. We're kind of trying to quickly last minute get some things before these really cold nights come up. But there are some species like Phragmites and reed canary grass and knotweeds that you really need to wait toward the end of the summer. That's the best time to manage them. And you can manage them different ways throughout the year too, but there's a lot that goes into it. So yeah, we're trying to finish up some of those things. This is a picture over here. If you're not familiar with Phragmites, this is a stand that we actually manage with a contractor. So we contract out some of our management as well. But this is a stand of invasive Phragmites back behind this lovely lady here. So it can get really tall and really dense. Here's bittersweet. This is the non-native. We have American bittersweet, which is our native counterpart, but this is the non-native bittersweet.
Are we seeing a screen? Unfortunately, I'm just I lost the screen, or maybe it's just me. I'm not sure.
Are other people having the same issue?
I'm good here.
I can see
the
it.
screen.
Okay. Well,
Okay.
sorry about that. I don't know why.
No, that's okay. I can't see anybody else. I can just see my presentation. So I'm a little disoriented with that. Yeah, so
if you're looking at the participant screen, you have to go over to just the speaker screen.
Well, I'll figure it out. That's okay. Keep going. Sorry about that.
You may have to get
Yeah,
out
I'm not-
again and come back in.
Yeah, that's what I would do, is leave and come back.
You just check out and come back. Okay, I'll try.
Yeah. I'm not very tech savvy though, so.
Me neither.
The pictures really do help. Yeah, so this is an example of Oriental bittersweet. And so I like to call it invasive or Asiatic bittersweet. But it can really wrap very tightly to the point where this tree is growing outside of the vine. It really gets big. I mean, we have one at Harris that we've left the skeleton of it to show people. That's like that big around, and it'll climb up into the entire tree. It has no growth limit. And so a lot of times what it does is it will topple a tree over from the weight of it. And so that's one that we pretty much attack it at all seasons. We do a foliar spray on it in the summer, and then we are going to be cutting vines all for the rest of the season. as long as we can until spring. So that kind of brings me into our cut stump, which is what I love about this time of year. I have a lot of volunteers who wait for this time of year too, and really enjoy that work. And so that's I enjoy that method too, because we can bring volunteers in on that. We do still use, they're called buckthorn blasters. You might have used one, but they're just they almost look like a bingo dabber, and they have a sponge on the end, and everybody wears gloves, and they have the choice to use it or not. We just make sure someone covers that area as a dabber, but it's really important for us to paint the stump. And you can see in this picture here how we put blue dye in the herbicide so that we know what we've cut, stump treated. And that's really helpful for regeneration of that plant. And so that can really help reduce the effort that we have to put in. Although if anybody has cut back buckthorn or autumn olive, you know that it will probably come back at least a couple times. So that's a big part of our management, is that we do have to go back and monitor consistently. Something that folks sometimes don't think about is that these plants, especially if they're to the point where they're big enough where you're sawing it with a chainsaw, they've been producing berries for a very long time. And so you might have a massive seed bank right under those shrubs. And some seeds, can last 9 to 20 years in the seed bank, is what they found. And, who knows, nature is pretty incredible. So yeah, it is a part of the invasive management that I think some people can get a little overwhelmed with. But once you get an area to a certain point, it's actually pretty enjoyable to go back and monitor and see the progress. And as long as you're persistent, sometimes we let a site go a couple of years. Like we just had this happen at Davis Foster Preserve, where autumn olive was regenerating from where we cut it. I don't think we were using the best herbicide. We've changed, we constantly evolve, and I'm constantly learning, and I don't mind admitting that I'm wrong or that something didn't work very well. And I think that was the case with this site, and we just had volunteers work on it and kind of get it right back to where we wanted it before. So it can be challenging, especially with all the land we have to deal with. So yeah, these are some of the biggest offenders this time of year. Invasive honeysuckle is probably in your yard, which, I have volunteers who have it in their yard, and I say, hey, it's up to you. You can remove it, but it does really benefit our local natural areas, because all of these things produce a berry or a seed. And, people will say, well, the birds eat it. And it's true, they will eat it, but they'll also eat whatever they can when there's not something better available. And so native shrubs and fruit producing trees and vines are really important for wildlife populations. And the Audubon has done studies where they actually prefer spicebush, which is a really cool native shrub, over something that's invasive. So just because a bird's eating it in your yard doesn't mean that they prefer it. And it can really affect our local natural areas. So those invasive honeysuckles are pretty rampant around the township. There's 4 different species. There's common and glossy buckthorn. Common is the more common one. And that might be one you have in your yard as well. Like I showed you, this invasive bittersweet, autumn olive, barberry, definitely something that I find in folks' yards a lot. And there is quite a bit of research about how those can be tick magnets. So that's another reason not to have it in your yard. And then multiflora rose, which is really nasty. So I do want to also, if people do have questions throughout, because this is a lot of information, there's a lot that goes into our invasive management. So just let me know. Our vernal pool monitoring, is anyone, I guess drop in the chat if you are someone who's a vernal pool patrol monitor. I'd just be interested to see if anyone on the chat here is. But this is a really great statewide program that Michigan Natural Features Inventory hosts and puts on. And Yuman Lee, if you don't know her, is an amazing conservationist that lives in our community, which again makes the work I do in our community really a lot easier because we have so many professionals and experts locally. But she has done all this statewide research on vernal pools to get more awareness around them. And the Vernal Pool Patrol is a way for folks statewide to see where there might be a vernal pool near them. They can go through training to learn how to collect data on these areas. So vernal pools are basically temporary wetlands. Often they're smaller wetlands. They don't have to be super small. We have some pretty big vernal pools. But the main thing is that, like you see in this picture, that they dry up at some point in the year, or they get small enough at some point, which is necessary for the indicator species, or the really vital organisms that live there. So if you haven't heard of fairy shrimp, they are one of the indicator species of vernal pools, and they need to have that drying period to carry on their life cycles. The drying out also prevents fish from living there, which fish are very voracious predators and eat salamander larvae and wood frog larvae and fairy shrimp. So basically, everything in a vernal pool can thrive a little better without those fish present. But we have a few vernal pools as the MCC that we have adopted at, we have one at Nancy Moore Park, Harris Nature Center. This is Lake Lansing North, which has amazing vernal pools. This one, it's kind of cool. We've been waiting for the beaver to get all the way through this tree. We've seen it really get smaller and smaller here. So that's neat because there's a lot of other critters utilizing these areas. And it's pretty cool that beavers are, running around here, causing lots of chaos. We're excited to see them around. But yeah, and then you've got your blue spotted salamanders, which are always really fun to find and a very lovely organism. So when we're not doing invasive management, we're trying to collect as many seeds as we can responsibly to go back into these areas that we have now managed for invasive species and try to rebuild the native habitat there. We don't usually go to a site where we need to start completely over. We really want to work with nature. We don't want to work too uphill. So a lot of our invasive management and native habitat restoration pivots on areas that they have native plant species present. They're not super dense with invasive species. We want to see some sort of ability to be resilient from these sites. So we do have sites that they're just plain invasive species areas, and maybe it has to be cleared, or maybe there's a neighborhood that's really involved in that area and wants to do a lot of work there, and then we'll try to rebuild that area as best we can. But really, we want to focus on the places that are already doing really well. They are, they're trying to hang on, and so we're just trying to give them the push to be able to do that. And so these places are all over the township. We have some really actually wonderful remnant areas. And so I just said that word remnant. When we do seed collection and a lot of our restoration, we are looking at places that we believe the plants have been there for a long time. It wasn't an area that was planted maybe because, if we see an area where there's a lot of native plants present, like there's an area here by our office, it's right by the big wetland boardwalk. And we've seen some really cool native plants come up in there, but they also put that boardwalk in and did a pretty big project around that area. So there's a chance that quite a few of those things were seeded. And because we don't always know where that seed mix comes from, a lot of times utilities and local agencies will utilize seeds that have been collected from the Midwest region. And we're really looking for the most local plants that we can collect seed from. And there's a couple reasons. They have been shown to be the most beneficial for local pollinators and wildlife. Those plants are going to be the most resilient because they're the most adapted to this area specifically. So the weather here, the climate long term. And so they just have a different genetic diversity to them, and it's very local. And so that is what we base our seed collection off of. And that's what we really look for. Like, so this area here, you see there's actually Phragmites back here, which is now gone because I've been managing it. But this is a tiny little wetland in the back of Nancy Moore Park that I saw the Phragmites. I went into the site. I decided to manage the Phragmites. And when I was in there, I found swamp milkweed, Joe Pye weed, jewelweed. We found some turtlehead, which is a pretty uncommon plant. And so, it was one of those sites where we were like, okay, this seems like it's kind of in the middle of the park here, away from disturbed sites. This feels like it's a place where we can collect really good seed from. Can we be wrong? We probably are sometimes, but it's part of the process. We're learning and we're doing the best we can. At Davis Foster Preserve, it used to be a farm, and it was planted by Pheasants Forever, which they get their seed from a Midwest region locale. So we don't really collect those seeds for placement back into parks and preserves. But we do have a lot of homeowners and maybe some really disturbed sites where it would just be nice to get some native plants in there. It would be way more beneficial than what's going on there now. So we do collect some of that seed and use it for those areas. So we try to utilize it that way. But otherwise, we're looking for, some things are pretty rare. Like this is American bittersweet. So I showed you a picture of invasive bittersweet, and we actually do have 2 locations of American bittersweet, and it's very uncommon, but it has a beautiful bunch of berries. And if you're wondering, American bittersweet, the berries will always grow off the very terminal end of a stem, and in bittersweet that's invasive, this berry clump will be all along the entire vine. So this one's kind of cool because you can just see it hanging off the very ends of the vines. So this is an example of something uncommon that we would collect. This is a wild lettuce here. It's not terribly uncommon in our township, but some things are pretty common here, and I go outside the township and I don't see them very often. So it just depends. But this is a great volunteer activity that's a little less physical. We're kind of walking through an area. We're taking our time. It's not hard on your back. So that's a really nice thing. And we just really get to get close with the plants. We get to be getting to know the plants as they are at that time of the year, which are not always that recognizable to people. And I think that's a cool part of the seed collection process, is that folks are becoming more familiar with plants that aren't just in flower. And so when they're walking through an area in the winter and they see bergamot heads, they know that wild bergamot grows there, and they're able to see that even in the dead of winter. And I think that's one of my biggest goals, is to just get people, friendlier and more familiar with our local plants, because they need our help. And if we get to know them, maybe we'll be more inclined to help them. So I really enjoy that part of what we do. And then, of course, when we collect the seeds, we do have to sort all of them, which can be a pretty big job. But we started doing seed sorting parties, and it's an indoor activity it's our only indoor activity, but it's really fun. We put on a movie or music, and we drink cocoa and eat popcorn and chat while we sort seeds. So another really fun way to get familiar with these plants. And then volunteers can usually take some kind of seed home to their property if they'd like. Things like wild bergamot that we collect a lot of seed for, and it's very common in the township. We like to give that one out. It's also really easy to grow in your yard. So there are some perks of coming to work with us. So I know that was a lot of information to go through, but it's what we do this time of year, and it's what we're thinking about most of the year, is all these little connecting pieces and how we're going to, steward through this season while we're gearing up and getting ready for the next one. So, we do still work through winter time. It doesn't stop us. We go out and we do shrub cutting and cut stump treatment on things like bittersweet and autumn olive and buckthorn. So we work all year long, as long as it's not too crazy out. There's been some stewardship Saturday mornings where I've come out to the site and been like, no one's going to show up. I'm going to get to go home. And someone will show up who's crazy and doesn't mind 0-degree weather. So we have a very dedicated community. I love it. So here's my resources here. There's a lot more than this. I can show this screen to you again, but I just kind of wanted to show you. This is our Meridian Conservation Corps website. So you can see our events on here. We do Stewardship Saturdays every other Saturday. So our next one is November 2nd. We have a Weekday Warriors this week where we are doing seed sorting at the service center here. And so this is where you can come to sign up for the Meridian Conservation Corps. Here's our stewardship calendars that I post monthly. So tonight we have a fungi walk. MSU Department of Plant, Soil, and Microbial Science is going to show us some fungi facts and things. So this is where you can check our events out. And because like I said, if you do want to learn more, I feel I'm not just trying to recruit volunteers. Of course, I want more volunteers, but it really is the best way to learn these things. And you never know who's going to be at a work day. I mean, we have, foresters, ecologists come out, people who don't know anything about nature, but they just want to be in it and help it. And so we have all kinds of folks come out, and then you really get to learn these plants really well. So this is where you can access our Planting in Native Meridian. And I did just want to show you that because this has a lot of the resources in it that these have more resources than what I listed on my page here. And if you're interested in native planting in your yard, and then we have some other resources here. This is a pretty long webinar about invasive species from when I first started working here, but it is packed with information. So yeah, if you want to learn more, this is a great place to do it. These are some of the websites that I listed. In Midwest Invasive Plant Network is awesome. They have really good resources for invasive shrubs, which not everyone does. And then we've got Midwest Invasive Species Information Network. This one has training modules that you can do, species alerts. So this is a really great resource as well. So I'll have this up, and then if anyone has questions.
Thank you, Emma. That was awesome. Go ahead, Sarah.
I had a question about you were talking about the root that was going around that tree, and then the American, whatever they were called, the one that's not invasive. So does the not invasive one not go and choke out a tree? Does it not wrap around?
Yeah, it's a great question. So it does wrap around, and when the places where we actually have it growing, it's just really interesting. It just doesn't seem to get quite as big, like in diameter. The vine doesn't. And so the thing is I've only seen 2 places where it grows. Outside of Van Atta's greenhouse does have one at the front of their property. But it just gently grows along the vine. It doesn't, or along the tree or shrub that it's on. I've never seen it get really tight or choke anything out. So yeah, it just doesn't have the same habit. It doesn't, wherever I've seen it growing, I see some vines, little stems coming up here and there, but like with invasive bittersweet, where you find it growing, the whole ground beneath wherever it's growing is just covered in tiny little vines. It's just producing so many seeds. So it definitely just has a very different habit. But it can be hard for us because we can't really tell the difference until they both vary out all the time. And apparently now they might have hybridized. I don't know. So it's not making our job easy, but we're pretty sure the ones that the ones that we have are true American bittersweet, as far as I can tell. So
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Sam? You have to unmute. You got to unmute, Sam.
There we go. Sorry.
That's okay.
Hi, Emma. That was really great and informative. I have to let you know this is my Wednesday to charge off to another meeting at 9:30, so I have to leave here in a moment. But I got to make sure I get your email. I saw it quickly, and I know I'll see it later. But if you don't mind, maybe we could have a conversation. There's just so much that you've said that I'd like to hear more about. One thing when you were talking about the invasive shrubs, boy, honeysuckle and buckthorn, that you're right about they do provide some food, but what a mess they make in the forests by creating shade at that low level and crowding out basically all the ground plants, which also offer, if they were allowed to live, a great food source for habitat. So that's one of the biggest issues with those plants. And also the fact that their canopies kind of reach out beyond their root systems. So if they're on slopes, we're in the forest, we're losing all sorts of topsoil based on the lack of that ground plane plant layer. So really important there. And I missed, unfortunately, what you were talking about with Phragmites. So hopefully I can talk to you about that, because I'm working on that with some groups up here in the northern part of Michigan. But and I do also want to hear more about what you're doing at the Tyhart Drain Preserve.
Yes. Yeah. Because I know you wrote the Mud Lake book.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so that's a special interest to me.
I need to read that for my means, because we look at land use history so much to base our decisions of where we're going to move next with an area. And so, yeah, we're very interested in like the history of the area and how it was used and everything. So need to read that book.
Yeah. Well, and as far as management of that area too, that's something I'd be interested in knowing more about what you're doing. And
yeah,
maybe you already know Bridget Booth, who wants to do this place-based education thing around the Mud Lake area, but there's just so much to talk about. So
yeah,
but unfortunately, gotta go to a different meeting. And
yeah. Well, thank you for all your thoughts. And yeah, and we're doing a lot at Tyhart, and I was just, we're seeing some really awesome stuff growing out there now. And I'm really loving that area so much. So it's going good out there.
That's great.
But yeah, I put my email in the chat, and so, or I can put my number too, but email is kind of better because I am in the field a lot. But yeah, so feel free to reach out. We've had, like with the Phragmites, we've had really good results with what we're doing. And I've just seen it disappear and disappear more and more every year. And I'm so happy. I just found a new stand that wasn't on our list this year that I'm kind of bummed that we didn't get it. But yeah, it's really shrinking wherever we're working on it. So I'm very happy about that. Yeah.
Great to hear. So
Yeah, I
I'm looking
know.
forward to having maybe a chat with you in the near
Yes,
future.
absolutely. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you so much. I appreciate you joining us.
Okay. Thanks a lot. Good to see you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, and Sam brought up a really good point about I kind of just jumped right in feeling like there would be this baseline knowledge of invasive species. But you know, the reason why we're attacking these things with such focus is because, you know, they're taking up, like Sam mentioned, canopy. So they're shading out things. They're taking up nutrients and water and space for native plants. And it's really just become apparent, you know, in the springtime, we see a lot of flowers in the woods. But when you go out throughout the summertime and into late summer, we should be seeing so many more flowers in our woods and in our grassland areas that we're not seeing. And a lot of that is because of invasive species shading them out, or even lack of fire on our land. So prescribed fire is another thing that we do as much as we can of, because even native plants like black cherries and maple trees can really shade out some of the things that have historically grown in areas, which is what we're seeing at Lake Lansing North Preserve. And so things like fire and invasive species management are really key to letting light in and allowing our native plants in the understory to grow, or, you know, out in grassland areas that are starting to be taken over by invasive shrubs and things like that. So very important piece of why we do what we do.
I think Amanda had a question.
So I'm curious if you're doing anything, or if you're having issues with lesser salandine or big buttercup.
Yes.
Yeah, where's that at?
100%. So I've been really thrilled with Eaton Conservation District and the folks over at in Grand Ledge or Grandview Woods. There's been some very dedicated people who have brought everyone together. And so they head up, Eaton Conservation District heads up this basically lesser celandine coalition for this area. And we meet once a year and we stay in contact. And so lesser celandine is a plant that comes out very early in the year. It almost looks like, if you know what a marsh marigold is, it's a little similar. That's like the native plant I can think of the most that it might look like. But it has little yellow flowers, and where it comes in, as soon as it's established, it just really quickly spreads and will be like an entire carpet. I mean, over in Grand Ledge and some of their places or parks, it is so bad. So for us, when I joined this coalition, we kind of thought maybe it started in Meridian Township. So they were like, "Oh, Emma, we're glad you joined, because we think maybe this started here and traveled downriver." It has these little bulblets that's how it spreads. So they'll get turned up from a flood and they'll flow downriver, or we can pick them up on our shoes or on mowers, and that's how they spread. And so we have it at Ted Blackwoods Park. It's really quite bad there. Actually, we didn't realize how bad it was there until this year. We'd been treating, and so we do a chemical treatment on it. It needs it. And we were managing one area without realizing there was a whole nother area. So we have it at Ted Blackwoods Park. Bruce Peffers, who's on the call, has observed it at Ottawa Hills Park. But I think that's the only place we've seen it. So that's
Okay,
really
good.
good. Yeah. So, and we've been doing river surveys and things like that. But if anybody does have it, I just got it in my yard a year ago. I started seeing little patches of it. So if anybody does have it or wants to know how to deal with it, you can contact me and I can help you, because if you have like one or two plants, you could dig it up and just make sure you really get everything. But otherwise, you really need to chemically treat it. And you have a very small window in like April or March that you can actually do that. So
What's
yeah,
it called?
let me know.
What's it called?
Lesser celandine. It's called Ficaria verna. So thank you for asking about that, Amanda. That's a very important species. So I put
Yeah,
it
it's
the name.
interesting. We've been watching it along the Grand and the Red Cedar Rivers, because it does spread by water, but it's interesting that it doesn't affect the water. It's really detrimental to our spring ephemerals, the woodlands, but yeah, it's disappointing. It's spreading by water too.
Yeah, there Bruce showed a picture. Yes, it's very detrimental to especially our spring flora and fauna coming up. It does die back after spring, but it's just awful. It carpets everything. Yeah.
Also
I-
toxic.
What, Peter?
I said it's also toxic.
Oh, is it
Yes.
to
Another
humans,
good
or
reason to hate it.
I take it you mean to humans?
Most animals, actually.
Most animals. Okay. Oh, thanks. Emma, I was also wondering, the native plant guide, is that something that I can share with people inquiring about planting with native species and perhaps on my website as well? As long as it looks like your name's all over it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to share my
Okay.
screen one more time and put my resource page up. So the best way to share the guide is to go to the MCC website here. It's right on that front
I
page.
see, and then you can download it, it looks like.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
okay, great.
Yes, and
I'm
I wasn't even going to put my name on it at first, and my boss was like, "No, please put your name on," because it's just I just want a resource that everyone can use, and we didn't print copies of it just because we're trying to get away from paper. But
Yeah, I
what
love that.
we do is, yeah, we just print it out and we put it in just a 3-ring binder in plastic sheets, or you can just hole punch it. We do the plastic so that it lasts a long time because we use it out in the field a lot. But yeah, I mean, you can print it out pretty cheap and put it in a binder, and you've got a book right there. So yeah, share it as much as you'd like to.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I would definitely credit the township. It's a great resource.
Oh, thank you.
Emma, we were talking past weekend, about some of the invasives that we have that were actually planted by the DNR as wildlife habitat and wildlife food sources, like autumn olive and
That's not true.
multiflora rose, things that just kind of got out of hand.
Yeah.
So it's the thing that we have that, we try to help things out, but we end up screwing them up.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, Bruce comes out. He's got his MCC sweater on right now. He's out all the time, chopping with us and planting. And thank you, Bruce, for all your help. And he's a vernal pool monitor. And yeah, we had that talk, that conversation this weekend where a lot of people are like, well, where does this invasive come from? And there's lots of different ways they get to where they get. But yeah, some of them we've planted them, our Department of Natural Resources, with intentions of this could be good erosion control or habitat for birds and wildlife. Which true, again, birds do use it. And when we take down a field of autumn olive, I worry about what they're going to use. And so we really do try to plant trees and shrubs in their place, because they've gotten so accustomed to using these things. But I think it's so, that's why, we really take things very slowly. And that's why we're trying to be very picky with our seed collection. Because as land managers, we're doing the best we can, but we find out all the time that there's a better way, or we didn't do it great, or, you know, it's just always changing. Or at least if you're a good land manager, you're changing and evolving, because you should. And I think it's, you know, and the DNR has no problem saying that it happened. But it is frustrating, because if we could just have the awareness, and that's why, you know, a lot of people do get very scared of these new invasive species coming in, like kudzu, or, you know, which they did find one population. But I think I'm a little more hopeful than I think a lot of people, because now at least we have this knowledge of, like, everybody, this was quite a few years ago, everybody got seeds in the mail. And so many people were like, they contacted the government and they were like, this doesn't seem right. Where is this coming from? You know, people are getting this awareness of, we shouldn't just, you know, throw things out. Like in Florida, I mean, look at the invasive problem they have. I would probably get eaten, you know, doing my invasive work. So it's just, I think people are getting a lot more aware, but it just, what Bruce is talking about speaks so much to that we do need to arm ourselves with knowledge. When we go to a nursery, we need to know what we're buying. We need to look at it. And that's why native gardening to me just makes more and more and more sense, because there's things that aren't even on our invasive list that we are seeing become invasive. And I've been doing this for 11 years or so now. And over the years, I'm seeing stuff that was just that little garden thing that no one really cared about. Well, now I'm removing it from the woods. So I think it is interesting, and we don't know how our actions are always going to affect stuff. So yeah, just try to do your research, try to take some time when you're buying things and putting them outside. That's a good point to bring up, Bruce.
I have a question. When you guys are removing Tree of Heaven, do you have someone scouting for spotted lanternfly?
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes. So my staff is really awesome. First off, they usually find so many more things than what they actually go out to look for, because they're so curious and smart. But we've all attended, you know, training for these species, and we know it's coming. We know we have Tree of Heaven here. So yeah, they've got their eyes out and peeled for that one. But so far, we haven't seen anything. Yeah. But like this week, we have them out scouting right now for Tree of Heaven, because like I said, it's not something we've managed heavily yet, because I just wanted to do it right. But yeah, they've been out looking for it. So we'll see.
I know the purpose of the vernal pool monitoring program is partially to map those sites. But a question for you and Brian, are those sites mapped in Meridian Township?
So let me share my screen really quick, if that's okay again. So we haven't mapped them ourselves. We do, like, once we find them, we know we know in our minds where they are, and we have our own kind of list of maps and stuff. But the great thing is that the Vernal Pool Partnership has done all this work for everyone. And it's such an amazing program, really. So they are mapped. Let me see. Let's type in our office. And anybody can use this, even if you're not in the vernal pool, even if you haven't gone through the training. But to do the monitoring, you do need to go through training. So we don't map them, because they already have identified what could potentially be. So all these dots mean a different thing. So this is a verified pool, which is a green dot, but a lot of them are just unknown, unverified. But MNFI has mapped them as potential places. They've looked for a depression in the ground using, gosh, I don't know if it was LiDAR or what they used. Maybe Bruce knows, but Yeah, so they mapped what they potentially think is there. So that's really cool. That's really helpful for us. And that helps us prioritize our management too, because vernal pools are so special. On the flip side, when you look at if you look at it, oh, here, I have it right here. If you look at our GIS, which is really helpful too, if you ever want to see, oh, it's not loading, township lines and everything. We do have a wetland filter, but as you can see, it's, you know, there are some small wetlands in here. This was also done in 2005, I believe, by Eagle, but it's not going to have everything. It's not, you know, a lot of vernal pools are so small that they're not going to show up necessarily.
Yeah.
And so it's really nice that the Vernal Pool Patrol has provided that, because we can, you know, we know where bigger wetlands are, and in the township we protect anything a 1/4 acre and larger. But unfortunately, a lot of vernal pools fall
I
under that
know,
1/4
yeah.
acre.
That's why I was wondering, like, if you can keep those sites from development as well, if they're mapped. So I was wondering how that coordinated with township planning.
Well, we would definitely utilize it, and if we ever get, you know, questions, I mean, I think the hope with the vernal pool project is that we can afford more protections for things like vernal pools. I know that Ann Arbor started doing that, and so that's something that Dr. Lee and I have talked about is how can we get something in place that affords those areas more protection, because a lot of people just think they're a puddle, and they're
Yeah.
really, really important places. Yeah. Yeah, great question.
Well, good. I'm glad that you're thinking along those lines.
Yeah. We're trying to think of as much as we can.
Wonder if there's a template that could be looked at in Ann Arbor in terms of what that might look like. Look here. Any other questions or comments? And we can stray from the topic as well. If people have anything burning they'd like to talk about, go ahead, Sarah.
I have a question about the deer culling. If there's a way to add areas, I know that I'm the association president for Cornell Woods, and I have neighbors that you have probably heard from, but they're having trouble with deer running into their sliding glass door, attacking their dog. I was wondering if is it a possibility to add the land that the land preserve just bought on the east side of Cornell Woods or Cornell Road, like if there's ways to add certain areas that seem to have, I don't know, I'm just asking about the deer culling.
Yeah. That's so valid, and I see the people in Cornell and like along Hatch Road and that in the shoals, and I hear you all, and I do get a lot of emails and calls about that area specifically. And so one of the tough things, well, so we weren't going to add that new parcel this year because it just felt a little too rushed. We have Cornell Elementary right across the road. We just have to we have to kind of go about adding new areas a little slowly. We have 80% support for this program in the township, but we have a minority that's very upset about it.
Mhm.
And so we do need to be careful with this program and make sure we're really putting a lot of thought when we add a new area. We certainly want to utilize that place. We're just not sure if it's fits more into our archery, if it's more of just into our police call. So we're just trying to figure some of those things out, and with the school proximity there too, and just make sure, safety is the utmost priority. And so there are people in that neighborhood who are very frustrated and in fact even angry that we won't put a hunter on their property. But if they don't feel like it's safe, we're just not going to do it. I mean, there's just no way that we could possibly make anyone feel unsafe for this program. So I think the challenge is that these properties are just so close and packed in together. And we're doing we're managing every single township property that we possibly can right now. And then we have almost 30 private properties now. So we're trying to add private properties on too. But again, in some of these areas, those private properties are just so small and they back right up to someone. But there are a couple places in there where we do feel that we've gotten permission on a couple larger parcels that back up to that neighborhood. And so we're hoping that we can get our police department there this year during the police call instead of the archery hunt. So we're really hoping to get a little relief in there. But, you know, the problem is the deer are so smart and they know exactly where they're safe. We've worked with MSU doing home range studies, and some of these deer who are 4 years old have never gone more than a quarter mile in their life. And so that's very telling of once they find a place that they're happy, they have food, they're going to sit. And and it's really tough. So I very much feel for the neighborhoods that are dealing with this problem, but all I can say is I'm doing as much as I can for it. So we're hoping to progress further into those areas. Yep.
Okay. That's totally valid. I totally understand it. I just wanted to ask and hear it from you because I trust what you have to say, but I also have the neighbors who are just like, this is just ridiculous. And it is to have your dog attacked 4 times is just insane. But so that's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I just got a picture from someone over there that, you know, the deer it looks like a herd, but then from their porch, you can see the person's porch right behind them. So that's the problem, is how are we going to get in there and do anything? But we're not going to stop trying. So
the deer have cell phones now too, which makes it annoying.
yeah, right. They can text each other and say when the hunters are coming.
I was speaking with Amber Clark last week, and we were talking about open areas within the township with regards to like a green burial area. And she mentioned, Brian may know a bit about this, that the Ides are the ones that own most of the open landscapes throughout the township. But apparently there's some infighting that's going on between the members of the family, and they are considering selling off parcels all over the place. So I know you're on the Land Preservation Advisory Board. I don't know if you were aware of this or not, but I found it kind of interesting.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that they might sell things off. That is very interesting. I do staff the Land Preservation Advisory Board, who is the group that acquires the preserves and has acquired all of them. And I will say that, yeah, it's been a little frustrating from what I've seen so far, just because generally when we have a family that's like a developer that owns an area, like everybody wanted to buy Walnut Hills, you know, that old golf course. The problem is that when it's a developer too, a lot of times they want us to pay quite a bit of money. Like they want us to pay the amount that maybe another developer would to put, you know, houses or whatever they want to put on that land. And so what we fall into is that we do an appraisal, and if they do not accept that appraisal price, we can't go any further above that. So it's hard for us to be competitive, but I assure you that if I'd land does go up for sale and it's not a buckthorn forest, we will 100% be interested. So yeah. And we've talked about that, Bruce, where we didn't feel like the green burial idea is amazing. Our board loved it, but we didn't feel like we had an existing place that would be good for that. But it would be different if we bought a place for those means. So if you hear anything, let me know.
Good to know. We have time for another question, potentially, if anyone has, or a comment. Peter?
Concerning the vernal wetland situation, I'm curious about the survey for endangered species in those vernal pools. I actually saw spotted turtle in the vernal pool, one of the vernal pools in Lake Lansing North Park. And I'm pretty sure they're endangered or threatened at least. And I was very surprised to see one. I didn't know we were in their original range even. They were a feature of my childhood down in the very southwest corner of the Lower Peninsula, but Berrien County and so forth. But I'd never seen one up here, and I thought they were under some kind of survival pressure. Anyway, I'm happy to hear what you have to say on that one.
Yeah, that's really cool. We've had multiple people cite spotted turtles, and I think we had one Blandings. I can't remember. I might be getting that confused. But yeah, and not just at Lake Lansing North, which I'm glad that you saw one there, but at like the Van Atta area by our Davis Foster Preserve. And so that is really, really exciting. And you mentioned like the rare species inventory or endangered species. And so that is something like we utilize Michigan Flora and Michigan Natural Features inventory a lot when we're in an area to see what might have been found there. I mean, there's quite a few pretty rare things in the township. And that's great too, because we do have, there is an endangered species protection. So I think maybe that was what you were alluding to, is that if we are finding spotted turtles in these vernal pool areas, then that's another means for us to, make sure that they get protected and that they're not developed on. And so there are some different ways that vernal pools can be afforded protection right now, but I don't know what kind of, proof they need for that. Like, do they need like a certain person to go out and see that animal? I'm not sure. Do they just need the documentation? But yeah, it's very interesting. And I really enjoy looking at the natural features inventory, what they've seen in this area. And that can be a really cool way for us to gather information to prioritize areas too. But that's exciting. Yay for turtles.
Emma, thank you so much for joining us. So I hope you'll come back on a more regular basis, maybe in a couple months for another seasonal update. And it won't be so far away next time, but really appreciate everyone for chiming in. And any other parting comments before we break here?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Great update.
Thank you so much. It's been a rich conversation.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too.
You too.
You
Bye-bye.
too.